How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of High Strangeness. I am your host, Paul Aguilar. Really appreciate you guys stopping back in. I know it's been a while since we've done an episode of High Strangeness, much less an episode of the Truth Defender podcast, which you guys can find on here as well. But I've just been kind of away doing things and finally getting back around to creating some more episodes and stuff for you guys. So I appreciate you guys stopping back in. We have a few guests here lined up for the podcast as well, so that'll be coming to you guys. I'll be posting like when that's going to happen. One of the hardest things about doing this is trying to nail down guests for you guys, and then kind of fleshing out if they will be able to hop on certain days and just scheduling in general. So that's always fun. And this is a one-man show here, so booking guests, interviewing guests, editing videos, and all that good stuff. So for everybody else out there that knows what that's like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So that'll be coming shortly. So you guys just kind of bear with me. I know you guys bear with me a lot on this channel, and I appreciate it. We kind of run through shows in spurts, and then we fall off for a little bit, and then we jump back on with another, few guests and episodes. So it's definitely a lot of work, and we try to fit it in as much as we can where we can. So appreciate you guys. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at a topic that I've always heard about and just never really got into it all that much. So we'll be discussing the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, obviously, this was quite a while ago. So back in 1995, at the time, I was about 10 years old. Yeah, about 10 years old. And there was obviously the bombing. Everybody's aware of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were the ones who perpetrated the bombing. So we're going to go ahead and take a look. So what it's going to be more specifically is Officer Terrance Yeakey, as you guys can see up here. So there's a lot of, I guess, strange coincidences and weird things going on with Terrance Yeakey. He was like one of the only officers that was assigned to work the case at the time. And then he ended up dying suspiciously after finding out a little bit too much about what was going on and how the FBI was acting, and it's a lot of shady stuff. So it's the Oklahoma City bombing, but more specifically Terrance Yeakey's story and what he went through. And then we're going to go ahead and dig in a little bit afterwards with a little more information that I got for you guys. So without further ado, let's jump right in. But yeah, if you guys are new to the channel, as always, please subscribe, hit that thumb bell, and give us a little more extra support. That'll help us out a lot, as well as turning on that bell icon so you guys don't miss an episode in the future when they do eventually come. So we'll be trying to shoot those out a little bit more. But yeah, let's take a look here.
And I know tomorrow be the same, 'cause we got a life of love that will never change.
Hey, my dad's good. Don't listen.
As the government proclaimed justice for all impacted by the bombing, the people back in Oklahoma still sought the truth and knew now they were on their own. The list of questions continued to grow due to the mysterious death of Oklahoma City police officer Sergeant Terrance Yeakey. Terry Yeakey, unlike the rest of Oklahoma, may have known too much. Officer Yeakey was just over 30 years old at the time of the bombing. The morning of the bombing, he was issuing a traffic ticket near the Civic Center Music Hall, which is about 4 blocks to the west of where the Murrah building stood. He dropped the ticket book, let the woman go, and says, I have to obviously attend to other things. He heard the multiple blasts coming from the Murrah building. Sped up there in his black and white squad car and immediately started pulling out the first of 8 people. Mr. Tom Hall being the first, a former employee of the GSA. Tom, to this day, in fact, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, still has the utmost respect for Officer Yeakey. He literally saved his life. Officer Yeakey.
So imagine, like, I mean, obviously when something like that happens, everybody responds, right? But you're like blocks away and you're the first one there. Just, I guess, depending on how you look at it, now we can look at it from the outside and say, wrong place at the wrong time. At the moment, he was actually in the right place at the wrong time, or however you want to look at it. But yeah, I mean, the dude, that's we talk about when you say fearless and all that stuff. You know, whenever shit hits the fan, so to speak, you always looked for that person who's running into a burning building or running towards gunfire. You know, those are the people that you want to hitch your wagon to, and you want to follow them closely. But yeah, it's crazy. I don't remember too much about the Oklahoma City bombing. Like I said, I was just like 10 years old. I remember hearing about it, like on the news and stuff, like seeing it on TV, like a bit here and there, but it was never like something that, I guess when you're younger, you don't really pay attention to that kind of stuff. So I didn't really get into like looking at the story about it until years later. And obviously now, you know, we're doing this video, but there wasn't like a whole bunch of anything really that I knew about it. So
being an astute police officer for 7 years, veteran of the Oklahoma City Police Department, knew that something was horribly wrong. He tried to get the official storyline out through his commanding officers at the Oklahoma City Police Department, through his family, through his ex-wife. And he chose to withhold some of the storyline because he was in fear for his family and his wife and his two young daughters at the time. What we found out, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. that morning, he was brutally murdered 1.5 miles from the front gate of the El Reno Penitentiary. From that moment that his body was found, we know that the crime scene was destroyed. There were spade shovels that were used to turn over the crime scene. Ballistics, any gunpowder residue, anything that had to do with his death was completely destroyed. It was corrupted.
He started having problems with it, not only at work, but his apartment got broke into, his car got broke into, things were stolen out of his house.
Sorry, I don't want to keep stopping, but that gentleman right there, Craig Roberts, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Marine Corps, retired, I think. So he actually wrote a good book about this whole thing. It's called The Medusa File, Part 2. There's a Part 1 as well. This is Part 2. The Politics of Terror and the Oklahoma City Bombing. So I just found that book as well. I'm going to try and read it. It's a pretty thick book. Like, it's thick. So I'm sure there's a lot of great information in there, but I reached out to see if we can get him on to discuss it a little further. So that'll be a podcast episode. Hopefully that comes through. So yeah, be on the lookout for that.
He had accumulated reports, evidence, I don't know what all, but he was going to take it out to a mini storage in El Reno. And he left one night, and he told a friend of his that they were going to go out to dinner. He says, I got to run out and put some stuff in mini storage. And as soon as I shake these feds that are following me, I'll be back and we'll go to dinner. Well, he never came back. Instead, he was found the next day by a Canadian County Sheriff's deputy. Well, they found his car first, and then they found him in a field near the El Reno Penitentiary. The damage to his body was obviously a torture homicide. It was obvious. But what intrigued me the most, that he had several cuts on both of his wrists, inside both elbows, both jugular veins. He'd been beaten. He had ligature marks around his neck. He had handcuff marks on his hands, on his wrists. And he had a small caliber bullet wound that started above on the right-hand side of his temple and exited low on his cheek with no powder burns.
The day of his death, when my daughter called me, I left work, went to El Reno to help because I could hear the seriousness in her voice, that she was getting upset. Why would the police be calling her looking for Terrance? And when we went to the apartment where he lived, the manager there stated to us, well, why are you looking for him? The police have already been here and taken his cruiser. So I'm not sure what was going on. It was strange. And about 10 o'clock at night, I had put my grandkids to bed. The phone rang. And when I picked the phone up, I could hear my daughter screaming in the background. And I assumed something bad had happened, but I didn't think death. And my son said, Mom, they found Terry. He's dead.
One of the things that surprised me was that there was no autopsy performed. The other thing that really bothered me was we were being told that Terry was high on drugs and drunk. And, of course, the medical examiner's office did a report on Terry and his injuries, which was really not an autopsy, but just an overview. And it showed that his BAC was 0, meaning no blood alcohol content. There was no drugs in his system. It bothered me that they didn't treat Terry like a police officer like he was. He was a good guy.
And he never said to us that I'm depressed. I'm, I need help.
Nobody ever did. That was said that.
Not to me, or not to his sisters. I think it's only fair that we know, as Terrance's family members, what happened.
Officer Yeakey's official cause of death was suicide. And that was actually laid out in the medical examiner's report at the Oklahoma State Medical Office, Examiner's Office. We've since were able to retrieve that record. What we found out, though, is that, number one, the crime scene was corrupted, went completely in the face of a proper investigative procedure. The extent and the amount of and the number of wounds on his body clearly shows that he couldn't commit suicide. Physically and logistically, you just can't do that to yourself. Terry also, we knew, was anemic. He would not have been able to traverse over half a mile from where his car was to where his body was found and not have passed out. His heart would have literally given out. He wouldn't have had enough blood pressure in his body to survive. The car was locked. The windows were rolled up. The keys were in the console. There was a bloody knife in the glove box. You don't stab yourself 13 times and have superficial wounds on along your arms and chest and your upper neck and walk a half a mile and decide to die next to a tree.
Being the family of an officer, I expected some kind of care and consideration for us, being the family of Terrance. There was another detective by the name of Mullinex that told my daughter that she looked at too many movies and she needed to see a psychiatrist. When we were asking questions, wanting to know about his belongings, wanting to know about things that happened during the course of where they say they found my son. And I don't think this was very kind of them and considerate of us.
That's always very convenient, right? So they say things like he was depressed, or he was on drugs or on alcohol, committed suicide. It's unfortunately been kind of like a running joke, but at the same time, not really. You see things like Elon Musk saying, I'm not suicidal, or stuff like that, because it's a very real thing. Especially the Clintons were in the office, Oval Office, right, at this time, right? So Bill Clinton was the president. Now, whatever you think about them and the conspiracy theories that, go with that, but, the Clinton body count is like the popular thing, right? Everybody talks about. And this was early on during that time, so it would have been like one of the early victims of that whole thing, right? So, I mean, it's whatever you guys think, but these are kind of like I hate to say conspiracies, but it'd be like one of the conspiracies that goes around the most about this. Not about Terrance Yeakey specifically, but the Clintons were like involved, like attached to the Oklahoma City bombing. So I don't know. I mean, he was definitely done away with for knowing what he knew. So it's not crazy in my mind. I know a lot of people are going to say I'm full of shit or this is, just another conspiracy theory, but just looking at what lack of a police autopsy and how he was found and what was done to him, he obviously didn't do it to himself, but I mean that's pretty much all we can kind of assume without knowing for sure. But
being family, that they should have talked to us like that, but they did. And as far as I'm concerned, that made me more suspicious of what happened to my son.
The brutal torture and murder of Terry Yeakey served not only to silence his voice, but the voices of other first responders who may have seen something that would shed light on what really happened. Those who keep their silence know exactly what Terry saw, but he will never be forgotten by those who ask questions and demand answers.
well, so yeah, that's pretty crappy. It's odd. So like I'm telling you, so like I mentioned before, if you guys wanted to know more about that whole thing when it comes to Yeakey, I'm going to be taking a look at that book that I was telling you about. So it's kind of it's an extremely big book, and I'm going to try and see if I can get Mr. Roberts on about that. I'll bring this down here so we can all take a look at it. Yeah, so this is the book, The Medusa File 2, The Politics of Terror in the Oklahoma City Bombing. So I'll just kind of read a little bit about what it's about. Craig Roberts was the only Tulsa, Oklahoma police officer who was assigned. That's not true. Yeakey. I don't know why they put Craig Roberts. I guess it was, right? So I have to look at that more. It says Craig Roberts, so I'm assuming he was working the case as well. But anyways, it says Craig Roberts was the only Tulsa, Oklahoma police officer who was assigned to the tragic Oklahoma City bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in April of 1995. At first, he was assigned to assist the FBI in the case, but after seeing what really went on behind the scenes and how the case was being politically motivated and the real reasons for the bombing, Roberts decided to do his own investigation aside from the official version. After months of work, working with a few other individuals who were determined to get to the real facts of the case, the end result was Roberts building case files that filled 4 file boxes. This book right here exposes the real John Doe 2s and others that the U.S. government refuses to acknowledge exists, and the real reasons the Murrah building was bombed, and by who. Anyone who thinks that McVeigh and Nichols acted by themselves also must believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone shooter in the JFK assassination. This book follows the author's first expose of government cover-ups, the Medusa File, Crimes and Cover-ups of the U.S. government. Journey through the maze of lies, falsifications, and misdirections of the case in the chapters that expose details left out by the media. The Medusa File 2 takes the reader beyond the curtain and the media's smokescreen with the demand that now justice be done for the 168 victims of the horrible event. So like I said, McVeigh and Nichols were obviously the ones who were blamed, right? But obviously nobody really knows why. They say it's, let's take a look at the Wikipedia here. So it says, perpetrated by 2 anti-government extremists with white supremacists, convenient, right-wing terrorists, convenient, sympathies, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, and this was before, right? So I don't know when this Wikipedia was last updated or when it was written. I should say somewhere around here, right? But these things can be changed and edited right here by anybody. So, the bombing happened at 9:02 a.m. and killed at least 168 people, injured more than 680 others, and destroyed then 1/3 of the building, which had to be demolished, obviously. The blast, damn, it was a big explosion too. The building's huge. Destroyed or damaged 324 other buildings within a 16-block radius, shattered glass in 258 nearby buildings, and destroyed or burned 86 cars, causing an estimated $652 million worth of damage. And it's so convenient too. Within 90 minutes of the explosion, McVeigh was stopped by Oklahoma Highway Patrolman Charlie Hanger for driving without a license plate and arrested for illegal weapons possession. Okay. Forensic evidence quickly linked McVeigh and Nichols to the attack. Nichols was arrested, and within days both were charged. Forensic evidence of what, though? I'm assuming they had like manure or whatever attached like on them, or but how would they even know to just do forensics on them specifically? You know what I mean? Or him specifically? Got you thinking there. Yeah, it says motivated by his dislike for the U.S. federal government and unhappy about his handling of the Ruby Ridge incident in '92 and the Waco siege in '93, McVeigh timed his attack to coincide with the second anniversary of the fire that ended the siege at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco. Yeehaw. I don't know. It's crazy. Like I mentioned, I don't remember too much about the Oklahoma City bombing at the time. There's a lot about it. Mr. Yeakey, fortunately, was an unfortunate bystander of that. He just knew a little too much about what was going on. And like I mentioned, that's early on of what happens. That's early. He was an early victim of the clean body count, unfortunately. Whether you believe in that or not, it's all good, but he was definitely one of the first ones silenced at the time, so that's quite unfortunate. I'm going to try to dig a little bit deeper into figuring out what the connection was there between the Clintons and the Oklahoma City bombing. I know somewhere there was some kind of explanation and story behind it or something like that. I don't know whether that was fake or not, but we'll look into it a little bit deeper. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I guess we'll make another video about it. But yeah, guys, let me know what you guys think. If you have any other information about the topic, anything else that I missed, if you have other stories or books that I should be looking at, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of different angles to it that I'm going to be trying to dig into a little bit deeper. But Ruby Ridge would be another one. Waco is another one. I'm here in Dallas, so that's a little closer to home. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. If you guys have any other recommendations on stories I should do, and be looking out for another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. So yeah, if you guys are checking us out on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe as well if you guys are checking us out. Hit that bell icon as well. Make sure that's on so you guys don't miss an episode in the future. And consider sharing this episode with a friend, colleague, loved one, whatever you got, whatever you guys do. That'll really help us grow so we can continue to pump out these videos for you guys. I'll have the links to all the social media down below. You guys can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Rumble, Facebook, Getter, all that good stuff. So if you guys have any questions or topic recommendations, shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. I really appreciate you guys stopping in for another episode of High Strangeness. We'll be looking forward to doing another one here soon. Everybody stay safe out there, stay blessed. Most of all, stay frosty.